Sean, you're all set. You're live.
Thank you. So I'm going to open today's meeting. However, just to do some quick housekeeping before we get started, I want to make sure that we are aware of who's all on the Zoom meeting. My name is John Taylor. Members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, I will read out their names, and if you can just kind of say here or present, that way our court reporter is able to ensure that we know who's here. Morris Hannon.
Present.
Jay Lewis.
Here.
Ben Farabee.
Here.
Frank Cassidy.
Here.
Wendy Kulik.
Here.
And Jay Lewis.
Here.
Okay. We also have some additional members, not members, but additional persons on this Zoom call. And so at this time, I am going to recognize those folks so that we know who you are. The applicants of our case, Nicole Veith and Bill Huey, are present. And if you guys can just wave your hands or say hello. We also have Jim Barkley, who is the property owner at 39 Eugenia. Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, John. Thank
Okay.
you.
And we have one additional person on. I'm not sure who. If you can let us know who you are. They're
John,
calling
can you hear
in
me?
by phone.
John, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Cindy Klein with Wertimer and Klein Landscape Architects. We are working with Nicole and Bill on the project.
Okay. Thank you so much, Cindy. And just for reference, Carol will be today's court reporter. So
And
I
Carol,
hope that was able to at least orient. This is a little bit different since we don't have our chairman here present to begin the meeting, but I just wanted to make sure that we are oriented to start. If you look at your agenda, you'll notice, like I said, we don't have our chairman and our vice chairman here, so we will need to elect a chairman. What I will do is allow Joe now to take over the meeting and begin today's meeting if there are no sort of unreadiness.
okay. This is Joe Wilson. I'm the town attorney for the town of Kiowa Island. Since we don't have a chairman due to people leaving the board, I'm going to open up the nomination process for nomination for a new chairman. Would anyone like to nominate a new chairman?
I would.
Click.
I'm a big one for recognizing seniority and willingness to serve for a period of time. And since at this point in time, I think Ben is the senior member of our committee, I would like to nominate Ben for acting chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, do we have a second for Ben?
I decline nomination.
Oh, okay.
I was afraid you were going to do that.
I would like to nominate Frank Cassidy to be the acting chair for today's meeting.
Okay, do we have a second for Mr. Cassidy?
Second.
I'll second it.
All right. Any other nominations? All right. I'm going to make a motion to close the election. Could I have a second for that?
I'll second it.
And then all in favor of closing the election, vote by saying aye.
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 All right. Well, so that's one nomination, and congratulations, Mr. Cassidy, you are our chairman.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks to all of you for your confidence. I'd just like to begin by echoing John's thanks to both Scott Parker and Ron Hacker. Ron didn't just retire, he also moved off the island, which is why he's no longer no longer with us. And with that, I'd like to call to order the December 14th, 2020 meeting of the Town of Kiowa Island Board of Zoning Appeals. Please note that the Town of Kiowa Island, until further notice, will conduct all committee and public meetings over video conference. These meetings will be streamed to the town's YouTube channel. Members of the public wishing to submit comments regarding any of the presented BZA cases should email their comments to Ms. Petra Reynolds, the town clerk, at preynolds@kiowaisland.org. The board members who will hear your case today are Wendy Kulik, Jay Lewis, Morris Hannon, and Ben Farabee, and myself, Frank Cassidy. Staff present are John Taylor Jr. and Joe Wilson, our attorney. Our case rulings from this and any BZA meeting are available for public review and inspection during normal business hours at the town hall. Since our meeting is being conducted virtually via Zoom, please be reminded that in order to obtain a clean and clear record, for persons listening live, it is important that we all be on mute when we're not talking and not to speak over one another. If you'd like to speak, please do so by raising your hand and wait until I acknowledge you. I would like to ask you, the members of the public present here today, if you are familiar with the procedural workings of the BZA. If everybody is familiar, I will skip the comprehensive explanation of BZA meetings. Anybody want to hear that comprehensive explanation? Seeing no one, we'll skip over that. Because today's hearing is a public fact-finding meeting, we are in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and South Carolina Code 6-29-70. Because this is a quasi-judicial body, everything said in this meeting must be complete, true, and accurate. All of the information provided to the BZA is considered evidence, and this board may certify contempt of circuit court if false statements are made, either in writing or orally. Because of this, each person who wishes to address the board will be sworn in. In order to expedite this procedure, those wishing to speak, would you please raise your hands, and Mr. Wilson will recognize you and administer the oath.
So everyone who's going to be testifying or speaking today, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'll now call case BZA 20-000012 at 41A Eugenia Avenue. Staff will present facts pertinent to the case, and I shall then call the applicant to address the case. The applicant will state their name and current address for the record before presenting testimony. We'll then ask those speaking either in support or against the case, and they shall follow the same procedure of identifying themselves, and they're limited to 2 minutes each. And then we'll give the applicant time for rebuttal. With that, John, would you please present the case for us?
Thank you. What I'm going to do is ask everyone to mute. We're getting a little bit of feedback, so if everyone could mute themselves before I get started, so that just ensure that we are able to hear. Thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen as well. One moment, make sure I'm able to do this correctly. Is everyone able to see screen? Give me a thumbs up. Thank you. Today's case, BZA 20-000012, we have a variance request for lot coverage. This subject property is 41A Eugenia Avenue, and our applicant, Mark Klein, being represented by the architect team, Bill Healy and Associates, Nicole Veith, the applicant representative, and then this particular parcel 20708000096. The subject property is within the R1 zoning district and is approximately 14,486 square feet in size. The particular request is specifically to increase the allowable lot coverage, and that is approximately 517.5 square feet for the single family residence. As stated, this property is in the R1 zoning district, and it sits adjacent to the beachfront along Eugenia. Properties both to the east and west and across Eugenia to the north also fall within the R1 zoning district. The property was acquired in 2019 by the current property owner. And this property is not subject to the Architectural Review Board's purview. The ordinance does grant a 33% lot coverage for this particular lot and requires 25 front setbacks, 10 feet side setbacks, and a 20 feet rear setback. And the proposed lot coverage for this particular site sits at 39.04, including 36.57 of total primary lot coverage. What I want to do is go through a few definitions within the ordinance so that we are clear on the interpretation as part of this today's case. And so the ordinance defines lot coverage as the total percentage of the lot area that is impervious to stormwater, including buildings, decks, walls, driveways, front walkways, and other impervious surfaces as defined by this ordinance and determined by the planning director. And within the ordinance, it does give specific lot coverage allowances for each zoning district. For this particular lot, as stated, you are 33%. There is an exception of what's calculated into lot coverage, what would be at grade boardwalks and landscape. And then if there is a flag lot, the access drive located on that flag lot would not be counted towards the lot coverage. The ordinance also grants an increase of an allowed maximum lot coverage. So for each zoning district where you have a maximum lot coverage, the ordinance grants an allowable increase. This is also may be referred to as secondary lot coverage that you may be familiar with. For this particular lot at 33% as its lot coverage, it is entitled to 20% allowable increase. For that allowable increase, there are specific elements or specific elements that are that have to be met in order for it to be counted towards that allowable increase. And for that, it includes driveways not defined by this ordinance that utilize pervious materials, pervious walks and patios, raised courtyards created by walls of 3 feet or less. Two other terms that I think are important to today's case are impervious surface. That's any material which prevents, impedes, or slows infiltration or the absorption of stormwater directly into the ground at the rate of absorption of vegetation-bearing soils, including buildings, asphalt, concrete, gravel, and other surfaces determined by the planning director. Furthermore, a driveway is defined as a minimum 10-foot path, and that is a vehicular travel away from any surface treatment, whether it being pervious or impervious, and that's from the property line to the garage. This would also include any guest parking areas or required turnaround for safe vehicular movement, and that's also as determined by the planning director. The Proposed plans do include a single family new residence that proposes utilizing a pervious driveway material. And this system is alluded to in diagram on sheet L3 of the preliminary grading plan within your materials. I will show you a few images and then walk through the BZA staff findings. Please note that this is a vacant lot currently that sits adjacent to the beach. Here are a couple images taken on site. The adjacent home to the right of the subject property. And this is looking across Eugenia Avenue. Like I said, the lot size is roughly over 14,000 square feet. And again, the applicant has also provided some images of the existing site. Here's a site plan of the lot showing breakdown of lot coverage. And the applicant has broken out the different colored sections that show you which areas of the lot are counted towards primary, secondary, or what actual materiality rather of each app that shows the materiality of the site plan. This is the graphic alluded to in my earlier comments regarding the actual drainage system. It shows a pervious system. And I think I will let the applicant speak to the engineering of this particular application further in today's meeting. But regards to the criteria, and this is criteria A, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the property. There may not be extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to subject property, as the subject property is currently vacant. Excuse me there. However, provided the applicant's letter of intent, 41A Eugenia is situated next to the property that has a very large home that is an extensive raised pool and pool deck area at the furthest rear of the lot. And additionally, there is a large grade change between our client's property and the neighbor's property towards the rear. That by allowing an internally draining driveway, we will be able to situate the proposed home at 41A Eugenia so that owners can achieve some views over the neighboring elevated pool deck. Criteria B, conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. These conditions may be unique to the subject property and may not generally apply to other properties. The subject property is located in the R1 residential zoning district, and adjacent and properties to the east and west are also in that same zoning district. Existing structures may not have similar lot coverage requirements based on the current zoning standards. And the applicant has stated within their letter of intent that this, quote, the existing neighboring home was constructed in or about 2001. And we believe that the size and elevation of the neighboring structure is not compliant with the current zoning ordinance and therefore not a typical condition of most properties, as well as a significant grade change, which is rare in the low country, end quote. Criteria C, which speaks to the utilization of being effectively prohibited or unreasonably used. And so the application of this 41A Eugenia would prohibit the construction of the proposed single family as it exceeds the maximum allowable lot coverage. However, it does not unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property as it is currently a vacant lot. The applicant has quoted that due to the elevation and size of the pool and deck of 39 Eugenia, that typical views of the oceanfront property are limited should the structure be required to be more towards the street due to the driveway material interpretation. Our criteria D, the authorization of the variance may not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property owners or public good. The proposed plans provide a pervious driveway material utilizing an internal catchment system. and the character of the zoning district may be harmed by the granting of the variance with the increase of lot coverage beyond the allowable maximum lot coverage. Per the applicant's letter of intent, we believe that the internal draining pervious driveway would be of substantial improvement to the adjacent properties by capturing the water within the lot and allow it to infiltrate into the land slowly. This would prevent runoff, water runoff into the street during a rainfall event. Criteria E, the fact that the variance would be allowed the establishment of a use not permitted. Staff believes that the granting of the variance would not allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in this zoning district, extend the physically non-conforming use of land, or change the zoning district boundaries. The applicant's letter of intent has stated, should the BZA approve the increase in primary coverage, this variance would not allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in the zoning district. It would not extend physically into a non-conforming use of land and would not change the zoning district boundaries. Criteria F, the fact that the property may be utilized more profitably should variance be granted, shouldn't be a consideration. The applicant has shared that this variance will not be considered so that the property may be utilized more profitably. Criteria G, the need for the variance may be the result of the applicant's own actions. Since the property, subject property is currently vacant, the structure and or site could be redesigned without the need of a variance meeting the current lot coverage standards. In the applicant's letter of intent, the home is in the planning stages, so we are not asking for a variance due to the applicant's actions. Criteria H, the granting of the variance may be contrary to the public or neighborhood interests, may adversely affect other property in vicinity, may not interfere with the harmony, spirit, and intent and purposes of these regulations. The subject property is not under the purview of the ARB, and the applicant has added, we believe that should the board grant a variance, the project will be in harmony with the neighborhood and will not interfere with or affect property in the vicinity, but hopefully improve the water management of that area. Criteria I, the final criteria, is that granting of the variance may not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plan or purpose of the ordinance. The applicant's proposed plans exceed the maximum allowable lot coverage of 33%, at 36.5%, 57%, with a total lot coverage of 39.04%. And the applicant's letter of intent states, we understand that from conversations with Mr. Taylor that the town is working on an amendment to the comprehensive plan to better handle stormwater management. We believe that by containing water from our property within the lot, we are not just in accordance by helping to be proactive to that plan. Before I give the Board of Zoning Appeals action, I also want to note that you have received in your materials two public comments, one from the adjacent property owner at 39 Eugenia and one at a property owner of 45 Eugenia. For the record, additionally, if you do feel that you need additional information before making a decision this afternoon, the board does have that ability to table a decision. But remember that you may approve with conditions or deny this particular case. And this is in reference to case BZA 20-000012. I did get some questions from Board of Zoning and Appeal members prior to the case. And so what I will do is maybe just go back and reiterate to the full board on some of those points, which may come up. Even if you have questions, we still will entertain those. When it comes to the lot coverage, staff has outlined this particular slide to kind of speak to the lot coverage. And so the lot size itself is 14,486 square feet. As stated before, the maximum lot coverage is 33%. 33% would give you an allowable lot coverage. And this is also being interpreted as primary lot coverage is 4,780 square feet. And the allowable increase as reference is allows 20% of your maximum lot coverage, which would approximate to approximately 956. And so that would grant or warrant or allow a total of 5736.58 square feet, whereas the proposed lot coverage of the application, the proposed structure does sit under, the total lot coverage does sit under the 39.6%, but it increases over the primary lot coverage number of the 30, where 36 is. And so that's the reasoning for the variance request to exceed the maximum lot coverage. I'll pause there and well, I have one more comment. I'm sorry. The other question that was received. The other question that was received was in regards to staff's findings of an interpretation on the ordinance. And to be clear on that, staff has received several inquiries from design teams on the interpretation of this particular front of why driveways are calculated within the primary lot coverage. And to that effect, the interpretation, whether the driveway is impervious or pervious, is calculated into the primary lot coverage based on being written that in time, a permeable surface could eventually become impervious over time by compaction or things of that nature. And so that was one of the comments I think that I wanted to share based on some questions received. Please note that any interpretation requirement would come from a different administrative process that would include both the Planning Commission and Town Council. So the interpretation of whether or not a driveway is treated as pervious or impervious, that can be done at the staff level. Based on the existing ordinance, there is currently not a threshold to measure or measure an engineered datum that shows what is permeable or impervious. As staff, I utilize, if that question arises, I would utilize comparative to similar models, or just looking at the engineered numbers. And so the final note that I will add is if there is a question of interpretation, the standard process for the change in that from a zoning ordinance standpoint would come through the recommendation of the Planning Commission. And so as town staff has been doing a lot of resiliency work with the town, other entities on the island to look at how can we become more resilient. As it is today, those conversations have not been advanced to the Planning Commission or Town Council for review or or approval. So I will end there and give it back to you, our chairman, Mr. Cassidy.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John before we call on the applicant to speak? Seeing none, Ms. Veith and Mr. Huey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, board members. I'm Bill Huey, and this is Nicole Veith. We're the architects. We're representing our clients. It's Mark and Jeanette Klein, the owners of 41A Eugenia. And thank you for your time to hear our application. And thank you very much to Mr. Taylor for all his guidance on the project so far. It's been very, very helpful to us. I guess I would make reference, John, to our sheet A003, which I believe you've already shown, which is our,
and
is that the one,
I can pause you, and if you need a sheet reference, I can pull that up. So just let me know, and
yeah.
I can do that as well.
I guess I'll mainly be talking from A003. So John just gave a really good summary, which I believe I was prepared to be a little more redundant with, but we are zoned R1, and the lot size again is 14,486 square feet. And according to Ordinance Section 12-63, we have a maximum lot coverage of 33% of primary coverage with an allowable increase of 20% of that 33 for a total of 39.6. Section 1263 of the code also states in subsection 3 that lot coverage is defined as means the total percentage of lot area that is impervious to stormwater, including buildings, decks, walls, driveways, front walkways, and other impervious surfaces as defined by the ordinance and determined by the planning director. And in reference to the lot coverage table of section 12-63, the footnotes list items that qualify for an allowable increase of the maximum lot coverage as determined again by the planning director. And item A of that lists driveways not defined by this ordinance that utilize pervious materials. So it was at this point that we were making some conclusions internally concerning the applicability of counting or not counting a pervious driveway. But at the time, we were considering using some form of a pervious paver system or another type of more of a percolating type of potential driveway. We went in October and met with Mr. Taylor. And he was very, very helpful to us at that time, laying out really what he just did again, I believe, for the beginning of this proceeding. And what we were really left that meeting concluded was that, and when we read through the sections with him, driveway, basically, as the definition of the ordinance, means a minimum 10-foot wide vehicular travel way of any surface treatment, pervious or impervious, from the property line to the garage. And so what Mr. Taylor was able to explain to us is that any areas beyond that 10 feet, say a wider driveway, for example, that are of pervious materials, he and his authority is able to deem that as potentially applicable to this relief. And we asked then at the time why 10 feet. And that's when he explained, as he just did again, that driveways, even of pervious materials over time, may be, as driven over, may be compacted to the point of rendering them impervious, which was to some degree, I don't know quite the way to term it, but I sort of call it a proactive technical assumption that's sort of been put into the ordinance, assuming that over time a driveway could be compacted to render it impervious. That pervious material being compacted and rendering it impervious, I think, is an important point of the ordinance, because I believe there's really 2 degrees of statement in the ordinance, which I'm kind of going to go through. But in response to that, what we're proposing here, and can we go to the, I believe, L3, John? That would be the landscape.
The landscape?
Yes, there. Oh, that's it. Thank you. So what we're proposing is a fully drained, internally drained, engineered driveway system that would be pervious in perpetuity by using an internal catchment system in which every drop of rain that hits the driveway is captured and piped into a cleanable catch basin system for infiltration into dry wells that are directly adjacent to the drive lawn area, not driven over. And what we found there is that a pervious surface is defined as, in the ordinance, an unimproved portion of land maintained in its natural condition, or an improved portion of land, covered by a material that permits infiltration or percolation of stormwater into the ground as determined by the planning director. So our point to this is that we're designing such a system that is really, in our mind, does negate the proactive technical assumption of the ordinance that a pervious driveway may eventually be rendered impervious underneath the vehicular driving area, because by nature of what we have here, an internally drained driveway system, that will not happen. We're designed a system that basically makes that point moot. We let John Taylor know the system we were kind of considering. We talked to him about other municipalities where we've actually executed this type of system. And one of those is being Sullivan's Island, for example. We actually contacted Sullivan's Island zoning administrator, and we reached out to him for confirmation in writing that such a system is viable from their standpoint. He did reply to us in an email, which we did forward to John. And we wanted to show that as precedent, that a local municipality's planning and zoning director does indeed state that the type of system we're proposing is deemed 100% pervious. There are a few caveats to that, one of those being that this system be engineered by a civil engineer. Mr. Taylor did follow up with us when we submitted this to him and asked if we had an engineered drawing yet, and we did have to inform him we are in line. Engineers are swamped under right now with work. Everyone's busy, so we're on a waiting list to get our engineer to design this, but we did send this to him, and at a cursory review, he said, yes, it'll work. It'll work fine. I just need time to size it for you. The plan you see executed is from Cindy Klein, who's also available and on this meeting right now, who we asked to provide a grading plan for the driveway that shows that it is indeed doable and viable to catch all the water that hits the driveway and divert it into a dry well system. This plan reflects that. So this is actually the grading plan of the driveway, internally drained and diverted to an on-site dry well catchment system, indeed rendering it a pervious driveway system. We also understand from Mr. Taylor that we believe, I don't want to misstate, John, but I believe you interpret that our driveway system is viable to be considered to be a pervious driveway. By definition, the water that hits it is captured and allowed to infiltrate into the ground, the soil adjacent. He'll have to follow up that. I don't want to speak for him. Using this driveway system, we'd like to request a primary coverage increase of 3.57% or 517.52 square feet. Our total lot coverage would remain compliant with the zoning ordinance and would remain under the allowable 39.6%. By utilizing the proposed driveway system, we'd be alleviating the issue of potential driveway compaction and therefore negating the proactive technical assumption designation, of the driveway potentially becoming an impervious coverage. We hope the board will see this interpretation as being no different than putting in a larger pervious pool deck, which actually we know that Mr. Taylor, as a zoning administrator, has made interpretations such as that. The right materials in the right place, he will deem to be pervious materials. We're simply asking for him to have the ability, or you as a board now collectively, to give him the ability to make that same interpretation for this driveway, engineered driveway surface. By allowing the primary coverage increase, our clients would be able to situate their home towards the ocean side of the lot that would allow them to gain some views over our neighbor's extensive raised pool and pool deck. Is significantly higher grade than our property. The ordinance allows the planning director to make an interpretation on items such as the pool deck and pervious materials. So we're proposing the driveway system that's not been used before on the island, but we'd like the board to allow Mr. Taylor to use that interpretive authority again concerning the proposed driveway to be considered a pervious material in accordance with the zoning ordinance and to meet the intent of the Kiowa Island Comprehensive Plan. We thank you again for your consideration. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Huey. Any questions for Mr. Huey?
I do. This is Mr. Hannon. I have the rear setback is still going to meet the minimum requirement.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Could you repeat the question?
The question is I just want to know if the rear setback of the property requirement.
Yes, sir. It will still meet. It will meet the requirement.
I have a question.
The coverage of the driveway is resulting in the overage.
Yes, sir.
This is John. They've handed off a lot of this responsibility to you of accepting this interpretation or their understanding and or whatever. And I'm understanding I wanted you to speak with regard to what you and the applicant have agreed to that may bind us.
So I want to share that Mr. Huey definitely shared our conversations on sort of the timeline of this particular plan and this project. The first thing is, I think, the interpretation of whether or not this system would be pervious or impervious. My statements to Mr. Huey and Nicole at the time was that this particular system would be warranted to be counted as a pervious material or a pervious surface. And that's on the fact that it would need to be presented as that way. As he stated, I did request engineered drawings. And so that would be something that would be reviewed at the time of submittal for a zoning application. But on its merits itself, we don't have within the zoning ordinance a metric as compared to what was stated sort of at Sullivan's, where it gives you an actual flow rate or an actual engineered number that would say, hey, this is this material or this system rather, infiltration rate. Those numbers are not specifically entered into the town zoning ordinance. But this type of system, as looked online, it could be done that way to be pervious. It just needs to be engineered to that fact. Beyond that, I want to be clear in saying that the variance request today is not an approval or request to give staff the power to make a determination on whether or not this is treated impervious. The board has been given a task to whether or not this increase is allowed to go over the lot coverage. So I do want to be careful on how that's read and interpreted, saying, hey, the variance request is giving staff to interpret me, giving staff the ability to say, hey, this can go towards the primary lot. This can go towards the allowable increase. Did I answer your question, Mr. Farabee?
Well, except they're having said that, if we should vote to accept the request, what does that mean with regard to the future planning or the go-ahead? And the same question, if we should vote against the request, what happens with regard to
so if I'm commenting to the implication, so if I'm commenting, I'm understanding you're asking what are the implications of a decision?
Yeah.
I want to be real careful on how I respond to that, because I don't want to lean you in either direction. But what I will say is the interpretation as is is what we've done in previous applications across the island. So interpreting a driveway as impervious or pervious, to whether or not interpreting a driveway pervious or impervious, no matter the material, is always counted towards the primary lot coverage. This particular application would essentially go against that interpretation, because now it's utilizing a different materiality that's counted towards the allowable. I'm sorry, the allowable increase. So you're technically allowing a sort of change in the way it's applied for future applications or future projects. How I am able to, as planning director, able to say to an application, this can be counted to the allowable increase or the primary lot coverage, would now have a nuance of being able to look at whether or not the material is pervious or impervious, when currently today, as it exists, it says no matter the materiality, it goes towards the primary lot coverage.
Thank you.
John, the reason we count it towards the primary lot coverage is because of we count the driveway towards the primary lot coverage is because of the potential for compaction in the future.
Yeah, potentially for compaction in the future. The other component that's I guess probably not as relevant, not relevant, I don't want to use the word relevant, that's probably more obvious, so it's not recognized as often, is that the size of a driveway typically would be large. And so when you have that much material, that it's counted towards that lot coverage because of that materiality, and it being stone pavers or concrete or asphalt, whatever that material is, it tends to be a good percentage of the lot coverage. And so that's that, and the compaction really is the primary reasoning of interpretation.
Yeah. What Mr. Huey stated was that the system that he's proposing would prevent compaction in perpetuity. I personally am not able to I don't have the expertise to determine whether that's a correct statement or not. And I guess I'd ask Mr. Huey, when your civil engineer, when you get to the top of the queue and your civil engineer gives you a ruling, will it address that issue so that we'd have some comfort that that is the case?
Yes, sir. It will. So because it is an internally drained system, because the driveway is basically graded to its internal drainage system, and then allowed to divert into dry wells for infiltration. Again, every drop of rain that hits that driveway will be collected and drained into an infiltrating system per ordinance. There's no compaction issue involved with that.
Thank you. Other questions?
Frank, my question, I guess, is really to John in terms of clarification. And that is, in the applicant is stating that doing things differently than as proposed would limit their views. And in the Barclays letter to John, item number 3, they said they don't believe there will be limited views. 2 different opinions. Can you help give us any more information here, John?
I would really ask that those 2 persons explain their comments further. The only thing that I would add is the views, and Joe probably can clear this up more or speak to it more, but this application is not necessarily concerned about the views, or that this is more so about lot coverage.
Yes, sir, Mr. Barkley.
Mr. Cassidy,
Yes,
can
thank
we wait until the
Sure.
questions
Oh, I'm
of,
sorry.
yeah, and then we'll have public comment. I just want to make sure we get all, but we can hold and pencil that question for Mr. Barkley.
Any other comments from the board? Questions from the board? Yes, Ben.
One more. What does this do to the requirement that the catch system be within the 10-foot driveway now?
Is that quite, I am not sure of which rule you're speaking of.
Well, I thought I read somewhere in the staff response that the present system or the system being proposed, one of the issues with it is that it's not within the driveway itself, and the catch system, the catchment is, in other words, the drainage system is elsewhere in the lot other than the driveway, and it seemed to be an issue in the write-ups.
I'm not familiar with those kind of.
Well, I'll have to look. I don't
Maybe that's.
I don't dream these things up. I couldn't dream of that.
Was it from one of the public comments?
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Huey, can you
I'm
speak
sure
to
it
that?
wasn't.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I guess if we go back to this sheet, what sheet was that? L3? L3. The diagram of the actual system. The drainage is actually internal down the center of the driveway, because so all edges slope internally into the middle for catchment of all water. And then that water is piped into a dry well system. So there basically, it is a 100% catchment system of the water. There's not a 10-foot outside of 10 feet or anything. It's actually all internal. Everything is diverted internally.
Okay, I'll look for what I'm
If
referencing.
I can, if from your statements, Mr. Hugh, I think I'm sorry, Mr. Farabee, if you're speaking to the definition of driveway, the 10-foot path, is that what you're referencing?
Well, specifically with regard to the catch system that they propose, it is not within the driveway. Is that correct? Your proposal?
It is it's in the middle of the driveway.
And I thought it drained off into a system that was outside the driveway.
It drains into a dry well system adjacent to the driveway and on our property.
Not within the 10 foot.
Not within the 10 feet. No, sir.
Okay. That, my understanding, and I could be totally wrong, but somewhere in there, I thought I had read that such a system for it to meet our current ordinance or guidelines are to be within that 10-foot driveway system. The drains has to be within that 10-foot system, but I'll keep looking.
Yes, sir. They're right in the middle of the driveway.
You say that, but then you say it drains elsewhere.
It drains to a dry well system directly adjacent to the driveway internal to our property.
Which is outside the 10 feet. Is that right? Outside the 10-foot driveway?
I guess there are really 2 points of engineering of this system. There's the collection point, which is in the middle of the driveway. And then there's the infiltration point, which is adjacent to the driveway. But the ordinance says percolation or infiltration.
If I may.
Let's move on. Let's move on. I want to hold it up.
Okay, but I think what Mr. Farabee is referring to is the note from the Sullivan's Island Planning Director, wherein he says the sheet flow of water cannot be redirected via pipes to another part of the lot or detention area, as you'd see in a commercial application. Is that what you were thinking of, Ben?
It's the thought, but I didn't think it was Sullivan Island. You may be correct on that. So let's just move on. I'm sorry if I find it,
okay.
I'll interrupt. So.
Yes, sir. And there he's saying across the lot. We can't have a piping system all the way across the lot. It has to be drained adjacent to the driveway.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Huey? Okay, we'll move on to the public comments. Mr. Barkley, I believe you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there was an issue raised by one of the other board members about views. that we had raised in our letter that we submitted on Friday. And I think the only way to really have a full appreciation of that perhaps is to look at the landscape plan. And you can see how far back our house sits from the point of this proposed house closest to the ocean. Now, we knew when we bought our property that somebody could build at 41A and probably have an as of right ability to build their hub closer to the ocean. But by increasing the density on 41A, and as Mr. Huey indicated, giving them the opportunity to push their improvements closer to the ocean, I think that impact on our view will necessarily be increased, one. And two, it doesn't seem to me, having owned this house for a couple of years and having the opportunity to be down there and close to the ocean, that their views are going to be impacted much at all by our pool deck. I think they're going to have superb views of the ocean, and in fact, they're going to have a significant portion of their improvements much closer to the ocean than ours. So I don't know that the view should really be a determinative factor in the board's determination about this request.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just to kind of reinforce Mr. Barkley and previously reading through his note to us, it would seem that the applicant has been a little strong in condemning them for their non-compliance, and I don't understand what the non-compliance is.
Mr. Huey?
Yes, sir. I believe the neighboring property, Mr. Barkley's property, is also an R1 property. That's correct. John?
Yes, it's also R1.
And it's a significantly larger structure, and also then the pool deck, the raised elevated pool deck adds more to that as well. I don't have a full comprehensive site plan, but I would believe that the lot coverage is pretty extensive there from what we can see. And I guess the aerial, John, that you showed at the beginning, sort of earth view of the home with a lot adjacent to it, it covers a good bit of that lot. I would, again, I'm not privy to any survey data, but it's a pretty extensive coverage. I would say that to Mr. Barkley's point, and it's something that I am not 100% sure about, again, exactly, but you can kind of see in this visual here, if comparatively looking at our site plan, you can see how much coverage this lot presents at 39. It's just it's 2001.
Is that the extent of your justification for that statement? I mean, don't.
No, sir. I'm not trying to use that as my entire justification by any means. I'm just trying to basically give a relationship of lot coverage to what we're trying to do. We don't think we're overburdening the lot in lot coverage. But I will say to Mr. Barkley's point, I believe that we would be able to discuss with our client some degree of positioning of the house that we might be able to mediate a situation that would be more appropriate in Mr. Barkley's determination. But if we're confined to the strictly to the lot coverage, our home would be removed. I can't remember the exact distance.
I believe it was about 45 feet back.
Further back? 45 feet further back. So we're conforming with the setback now. If for some reason the consideration of the pervious and impervious surfaces dictated the removal of our house would be another 45 feet back on the property.
John, when the Barclays built their house, did they require a variance from the BZA in order to proceed?
I have no records on a variance for this application. I didn't pull the complete property specs for the 39 Eugenia, but I don't have any variances as I know today.
Thank you.
Mr. Barkley?
Yeah, I can only respond in this fashion. Two things, if I may. One is we've only owned the house for about 2.5 years. I recall the gentleman who built the house. I frankly, I've forgotten his name now, but we're the third owner of the house. So I don't really know the background of, the permit and approval process for the house construction 20 plus years ago. But we have no notice or any indication, because I know substantial work was done to the house 5 or 6 years ago before we bought it. Don't have any indication that there were any permitting or approval issues at that point in time. Number one. Number two, I would say to Mr. Huey, our letter that we submitted on Friday contains some contact information for me, and if it would help their clients and if it would help the board, we're certainly happy to have a discussion about their proposed improvements, because we know they bought the property. We'd like to see them build on it, and maybe there's a way to arrive at something, at least as between the two owners, that we could all live with if the board were so inclined to give them some relief in this application.
And I'll state for you, Mr. Barkley, I know my clients would be happy to do that and speak with you.
Okay.
Could I add one more thing, Mr. Cassidy? That as we have this conversation and showing the aerial, I just wanted to also remind you that there were 2 subdivision surveys applied in your materials that show the context of the lot too. So I just wanted to enter that piece if you're for your information.
Thank you. Any further comments?
One more question for the applicant, if I may. What's your alternative plans if this variance isn't approved? I mean, you must have looked at what else you could do.
Well, we had a couple of potential thoughts. There's an adjacent property of Lot B. We had potentially approached that process of, we believe, is beginning design now. That owner about potentially maybe a shared driveway scenario that would then reduce lot coverage for all parties. They're not interested because they wanted to orient their house in the other direction and their driveway on the other side. That was one thing we had considered to maybe, and what we were also trying to do is look at the sort of net impact to the neighborhood as far as the idea of pervious and impervious surfaces, and the idea that if we can collect a lot of the water, because from what John was telling us and some of what we see by visiting the lot, there's evidently there's some water issues on the street. I believe there's some much bigger issues a little further down the street, but there are water issues on the lot. We were trying not to exacerbate that, but actually hoping to help alleviate some of that issue. So we were hoping a meeting with that property owner would help, but they're not really open to that. I would say to get back to addressing Mr. Barkley's point and what I just stated on behalf of my client, that we would be willing to sit down with him and work on positioning. I believe, though, we would still be required to have some relief. And in light of that, I believe the square footage of relief that we're requesting right now would probably be reduced to some degree if we do position the house back further. And I don't know if it's appropriate for me to ask now if there's some degree of interpretive ability that we could have Mr. Taylor have to work with us in light of this. It is a new driveway system. And again, we believe the ordinance now is based, again, on a proactive kind of technical assumption that if this happens, then this could happen. So if you could, and we didn't want to put John on the spot, because he had said that although he has the ability to make the interpretation for some deck surfaces and walking surfaces, this is a new system, and he felt it better to go to the board regarding this driveway alternate system. If you could agree that this system is viable to be deemed as a pervious system, then I will state on the record for Mr. Barkley and for the board that we will work with our clients and Mr. Barkley on positioning, and we present a plan to zoning and to John that would still incorporate the same driveway system. But again, we'd be happy to talk with Mr. Barkley further about positioning of the house. It would probably be a request for less, is what I'm getting at.
Thank you.
Could I jump in? I just wanted to clarify that the application of today's variance is not necessarily the giving you the right as a board to make a determination on impervious, pervious. So just to be clear of that.
We didn't know where to go to get this interpretation, and John, again, I don't want to misspeak, but I know when we met, he said that he didn't feel that he was in a position to make that determination, and he thought it better that the board hear it, see what the system is, and we're going to need some form of determination, I guess, at some point to see if we're viable here with the engineered proposed system that we're presenting.
John, the comment you just made, is that directed towards not assuring that there's no precedential value to anything we do with this case?
I don't know if I'm able to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm troubled by this because I think these folks have made a good faith effort to come up with a system that is impervious in perpetuity, to quote Mr. Huey. But I'm not capable of judging that, and I'd want to see the engineer's report before I ruled on it. If we had a civil engineer's report that said that, then I'd be comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. But John, if I understand what John's saying correctly, you're saying that our decision isn't to decide whether we're going to give a conditional approval or not a conditional approval based on pervious or impervious. Is that correct?
I would say that your task with is looking at the lot coverage overage and determining whether or not the application has satisfied all of the criteria to grant that overage. Period. Yeah. So you are able to take all of the materials and evidence that's submitted for you to apply, but that's the interpretation or today's decision rather.
Okay.
So we can approve or approve with conditions or deny. So the conditions could be what we state.
Yes.
Yes.
Other comments? Hearing none, I'd entertain any motions that anyone would like to make.
Okay, I'll go out on this then. I'm certainly understanding the desire to alleviate or to help mitigate any flooding issues or drainage issues that may contain in here or in this particular lot or anyplace else in Keowa. But it's still troublesome to me that most of our discussion has been around the drainage on the driveway, and there's been no look at other aspect of the house. I personally would recommend that we not approve this based upon what I see it not being a hardship on the applicant. So I recommend that we do not approve this request. I propose.
Is there a second? No second? I'm sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
There's a lot that's troubling about this, and without the civil engineer's report, which will be forthcoming, I'm not inclined to go ahead. So I guess I would say I'll second Ben's motion.
Any further discussion? Let me call the roll. So a vote yes is a vote to deny the variance request. A vote no is to vote in favor, is a vote not in favor of denying the variance request. Wendy,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Frank, no. The motion is carried, denying the request for a variance. And I guess I would state that it's primarily because the application of the ordinance does not unnecessarily restrict the utilization of the property.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry,
Yes,
I don't want to interrupt. I just wanted to see if I could ask a clarification follow-up.
Sure.
I believe to the point of the engineering report and the other information, and to my statements to Mr. Barkley, I wanted to see procedurally if we were able to work with our clients, Mr. Barkley, and the other concerned neighbors about positioning of the house. And we were able to have an thorough engineered data that we're hopefully going to get here soon with our engineer about this system. Can we reapply for a different configuration? I appreciate the fact you had to vote on what we submitted. I definitely appreciate that, but I'm asking if we have the ability to reapply with a different configuration and more engineered data of our system.
I think the answer is yes, although I'll defer to the professionals in the room, Joe and John.
Yes, so you would be able to reapply for a new application. It would just need to be a different application. So the same arrangement would not be able to be submitted. If it is a same application, it would need to be at least 1 year.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, any other further discussion of this matter? Any additional business?
Frank, we didn't talk about the calendar. I don't have any issues with it, you know, the meeting schedule, but I don't think.
Sorry, Wendy, that's right. Yeah, you should note the calendar. Anyone who does have issues with it, I know I don't.
If you all can just make a formal approval of that, that'll be great for the record.
I so move.
Second.
Second, agree.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Any other business?
No other business. I just wanted to highlight, just in January, we will have, I think we have one case, potentially two. I just wanted to let you all know that we will have a January meeting. And so at the January meeting, do expect to do the elections again for our chairman and vice chairman roles, respectively. We'll do that at the January meeting. Each year we elect new officers. And so we'll do that then for our two vacant positions.
Yeah, John, will there be two new people coming on the board?
So those positions have been advertised, and we won't expect them to be with us until potentially February. Their applications for the advertisement for that will close at the end of this month. And so council will need to make those approvals. And so we anticipate if council does make the approvals in January or February, that's when we may see them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye.